All right, guys. So there's an argument to be made that the resistance is not only alive and well, but stronger than ever. So we have some new data that's coming out. Look, my intuition tells me this is only going to get stronger and stronger and stronger as time goes by, given how in Trump's second term, he's completely unhinged and he's not listening to reason. There's nobody in the administration to keep the train on the tracks and temper his worst impulses. So here we go. Harry Enton segment talking about the resistance. Let's see what the deal is.
So weekly Google searches for protests. Look at this. Up 1,200% versus a year ago. And it's at or even exceeding the levels that we saw during the January 2017 protests, which you remember were everywhere. It is almost as if I feel like Frankenstein, right, saying the monster, it's alive, it's alive.
I think, and I'm curious what you guys think of this, I really think that the hands-off protest that just happened, I think it was bigger than the Women's March. So if you remember in 2017, Trump's first term, you had the Women's March that happened. It was the first huge protest against Trump. It was big. It was big. But I think that this one surpassed it. At first, the numbers reported were 500,000. Then they upped it to 600,000. Then I saw millions. CNN said millions. And some were even saying as high as 5.2 or 5.3 million people. So I think this time, this giant anti-Trump protest was bigger with more fervor, right? And 1,200% increase for the search for protest on Google. That says something, bro. And let me tell you something. We know who and what they're protesting. That's not a hard one to figure out.
Democratic protest, the idea of protesting Donald Trump, if the resistance was a little bit lacking at the beginning of Trump's second term, it is very much alive now. The protests are out there, and the interest in protesting Donald Trump is definitely there now.
Which, by the way, that it's actually a great point, because when Trump first got in there the second time, you saw a lot of people sort of resign to it. You saw people in media, you saw Democratic politicians, and you saw voters, and the polls reflected this, that people were like, look, man, it is what it is. Try to work with him. Try to do some bipartisan stuff. Like, they won. It is what it is. And he won the popular vote, too. So what are we going to do? That was the sentiment among voters and among, like I said, people in media, people in the party, in leadership roles. And then, like this, as soon as people realized what he was actually doing, the policies he was pursuing, on a dime, the Democratic base completely flipped and went to resist everything. Please resist everything. Whereas the first time he was in office, it was more resistance right away. People were like, no, don't work with him. Hillary won the popular vote anyway. This is sort of a fluke that he won. He's illegitimate. Like, just fight him right off the bat. This time, people were resigned for a period of like a week, maybe. And then after that first week, they were like, whoa, wait. No. Not only do we need resistance, we need stronger, better resistance than ever before.
Looking at in terms of the polling on this, the polling on resistance to President Trump, maybe now versus before.
Yeah, okay. So, again, the whole thing about this second term was maybe the resistance was lacking compared to Donald Trump's first term. And one of the best ways we can understand the quote-unquote resistance is how strongly folks disapprove of the job that Donald Trump is doing as president. And I want to take a look here at a historical comparison, right? Compare where we are now in April of 2025 compared to November of 2018. And what do we see? Well, in November of 2018, the strongly disapprove of Trump was 42%. Look at where we are now, 43%. The level of strong resistance to Donald Trump now is matching what we saw back in November of 2018 when, of course, Republicans got swept out of power in the House of Representatives. It was a Democratic sweep. They crushed them, gained 40 seats. And what we're seeing now is the same level of, quote unquote, strong resistance to Donald Trump. This is very different from what we were seeing at the beginning of Donald Trump's second term. As I said at the beginning, the resistance in the polling data, in the data on Google, suggests that the resistance is, quote unquote, it's alive.
You see these numbers here, I think it's only going to get even stronger. It's only going to get even stronger. Because the fact of the matter is, he made a lot of horrible decisions in his first term. His first term was bad, but there were some guardrails. Now there are no guardrails, which is why you see him warmongering with Greenland and Denmark and Canada and Panama and Iran and Venezuela and all these different countries. That's why you see that. That's why you see him totally flouting the Constitution, rounding innocent people up, sending them to a slave labor camp in El Salvador. That's why you see them kidnapping pro-Palestine protesters and revoking their visas and things of that nature. That's why you see them going crazy with their economic moves, tanking the market, gutting the social safety net with Doge. The amount of damage done in such a short time frame is way far above and beyond what happened in the first term, which is why these numbers are what they are, and they're only going to get stronger. They're only going to get stronger.
One of the big stories that we were tracking last week were the special elections and how much and what were people reading into it and could take from those election results. How does that apply to kind of this conversation?
Okay, so you see the polling here, you see the Google data there, but what about in the real world? I like to live in the real world. I'm a big fan of MTV. Okay, so take a look. Special House elections, the average Democrat, how they are quote unquote doing versus the prior Democratic nominee on average in those different districts, right? We had 2 Florida special elections last week. How much better did they do? They did 19 points better on average. In April of 2017, there were 2 special elections. The Democrats did 18 points better than Hillary Clinton did on average. What we're seeing right now in the election results, very similar to what we saw in Donald Trump's first term. And again, of course, that led to a big sweep for Democrats in the House in November of 2018.
Again, we're talking about 1 point here. It was both 1 point more of resistance overall, 1 point better for the Democrats in the special elections now versus 2017. But it's going to get stronger. So we're already sort of surpassing it. It's going to get even stronger. I'm telling you, it's going to get even stronger. Because we've never seen anything like this in modern American history. On every front, there's an all-out assault. It's a robber baron coup. It's a fascist takeover. And people are waking up. They're waking up at a tremendous clip. As I told you guys, you go to that rally the other day, you see people wearing Free Luigi shit, right? You read the people are onto the real problem, which is the billionaires. How many signs said the only minority hurting this country are the billionaires? So there's more people. They're more fired up. And this time around, they're more correct. They're further left. They understand what it means not only to resist Trump with everything you have, but also to have a counter ideology and a counter vision and a counter story. That story being, you guys blame the trans people and immigrants for the state of the country today. You're just wrong. They're our brothers and sisters. The real problem are the multinational corporations, the billionaires, the money in politics, the legalized bribery and corruption, the robber barons. And now we know what our agenda is going to be based on that. Whereas for a long time, Democrats were sort of in the wilderness, right? They were married to centrism. So they had no story, they had no narrative, they had no villains. Now, mass awakening. And that's why these numbers are what they are, and that's why they're only going to get stronger, man. I'm telling you. Because with no brakes on this car, and this guy completely unaccountable to anything and everybody, you just wait for it. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.